approach to regulating emerging technologies such as blockchain and cryptocurrency, right? And I think there was a significant consensus amongst people in the four cities on this. Having worked personally across multiple emerging technology sectors from a policy standpoint, I think I deeply empathize with the modern state, which is trying to regulate fast evolving, emerging, complex technologies, right? And you try to do that with very little data, with little precedence and little domain knowledge. Right? And therefore, as a natural consequence, you end up over-regulating. You are on the side of over-regulating than not. Right? There is always an overestimation on part of the regulator, an overestimation of the risks involved and an underestimation of the potential. But then what kind of an approach would bridge this gap, which will help us better estimate, have a better estimation of risk and potential to regulate for innovation, right? And I think one important thing, of course, is an interface. When you yourself are regulating with little data, little understanding, little domain knowledge, then reach out to people who do have that, right? And as a process, I think right from the beginning, as I was speaking on the panel earlier as well, we saw that the regulators, in fact, were somehow deeply disconnected with the industry on this one particular issue, which interestingly in the last 5 years of the last government was not necessarily the case across other technology sectors, right? So you look at the TRI, for instance, massive public consultations through and through. You see how the data privacy bill came into play. You had the Sri Krishna committee, consultations across the country with the judge himself going and hosting these consultations. We did not see any of that, as is also evidenced by multiple RTIs which have been filed where, in fact, in the court case before the Supreme Court, which we represent the exchanges, there is actually an admission by the RBI saying that no such consultations were held. Right? So that was the state of affairs when it came down to blockchain and cryptocurrency for some odd reason. Right? So one regulatory mindset that we need to see changing is an interface, a greater interface with the industry. But more than that, it is not, I don't think it is ideal to have tightly boxed regulations, very rigid regulations when it comes to emerging technology. Right? Regulations have to be as fluid and flexible as the subject matter of what you're regulating as well. Right? Technology makes itself obsolete, and therefore the regulations are at risk of becoming obsolete very, very quickly. Now, how do you deal with that? Have a slightly more light touch approach to regulation, as opposed to a heavy touch approach. The regulator should keep itself should hold itself to broadly listing out broad principles for regulation rather than specific regulatory do's and don'ts. Leave it to the industry by way of a self-regulatory mechanism to ensure that industry members stick to those broad principles. Deviations from those principles, if minor, can be self-corrected by mere cautioning. If there are major deviations, then yes, the industry can, and typically that's how industry bodies will operate, which is there's a self-correction, there's a mechanism, internal mechanism to penalize, etc. If the regulator is not entirely confident of a self-regulatory approach, we can imagine a co-regulatory mechanism as well, where there is self-regulation, but it is ultimately blessed by the regulator. Right? So you come up with your self-regulatory mechanisms, regulations, etc. Take it to the government after the industry has formed consensus and let the regulator bless. These kind of mechanisms will probably do a much better job at regulating fast evolving technologies. One other thing that I want to emphasize upon is that any regulatory approach, and what really, I mean, if you think about the blockchain and cryptocurrency industry, what are the regulatory objectives here? Primary regulatory objectives are investor protection. It is management of your tax base. It is controlling your monetary policy. But I think one other regulatory objective, which should stand common to any such regulation of any such emerging technology sector, is the potential of innovation itself. Innovation or facilitation of innovation should by itself be a regulatory end goal, amongst other things. And that is because innovation has the potential to maximize social and economic benefits for everybody, for the country at large. So I think these are the three broad principles that there seem to emerge a certain consensus among small town halls that should be rolled out. Okay. Talking about certain more specific recommendations, Of course, there was a lot of discussion around sandboxes, and I think that's an opportunity lost already, because for those who may be in the know, the RBI has already finalized its proposal for a sandbox, which clearly does not permit any cryptocurrency related ideas to be rolled out as part of that sandbox. So there are 8 or 9 financial technologies which are open for acceptance as as part of the sandbox, but cryptocurrencies has been explicitly kept out of that sandbox system. Other specific recommendations was around the definition of cryptocurrencies itself. This is something I spoke at a certain length in my prior panel. But this is a very important consideration. The issue today is that whether the circular that came out last or since then, the RBI has not done a good job or not even made an attempt yet to define with precision what cryptocurrency really is. And the implication of that is, what is this regulation going to really apply to? The wider universe of digital assets should not be a subject matter of this regulation. It is, if at all, you seek to regulate and the concerns that the RBI has with respect to, as we said, your tax, capital flight, and AML, etc., then you are really concerned about currency, about digital assets which have a use case as a currency, which can be used as means for exchange of value, right? And while, of course, we are not. I mean, I don't think very many are on page in terms of regulation or such strict regulation even of that. But if we were to, then I think this precise definition, this precise distinction between what is a digital asset for use as currency and not should be made out in the regulations very clearly. The other regulation that was discussed at some length was the dashboard, which actually also kind of touched upon. Dashboard has not been is not a new idea. In fact, it's a proposal that was made a long time back to the RBI by some of the exchanges, but it did not find any takers, which is interesting, because what the dashboard does, and the idea of a dashboard really is to give real-time access to regulators of really anything they want to know about whether it is the KYC information of a particular trader or what transactions they're making. Controversial as it is, and less than ideal, it did really address the very specific concerns that the RBI has. But somehow this idea has not taken. I mean, it definitely did not catch their fancy when it was first introduced. The other recommendation similarly was white labeling of right, and white listing of addresses. So essentially that the registered exchanges in the country, the licensed exchanges, could have a centralized database of whitelisted traders, right, who alone could trade with each other. That would again give the RBI immediate ability to ensure that there's concerns of capital flight, etc., are addressed. Again, controversial, not something which syncs well with the very kind of philosophy of blockchain, which is primarily peer-to-peer, anonymous, etc. But nevertheless, it does go a long way addressing the RBI's concerns. Has not found favor with them in the past. Other recommendations that were floated were regarding asset insurance, because if investor protection is one of the primary concerns, then asset insurance could somehow be used to address. So mandatory insurance, for instance, could help with that. And lastly, an awareness drive towards largely kind of focused towards consumer protection again, which could be driven by the exchanges themselves. In fact, there was another proposal for just like the SEBI has, for instance, the mutual fund industry contribute to pooling money in a fund which is used more specifically for investor kind of education and awareness. Something similar could also be done for the cryptocurrency industry. So these were some of the more interesting specific kind of recommendations that were brought up. And we hope to take this conversation forward with this report, and with the fact that now there are, there's a larger kind of a bottoms-up approach that was taken with these town halls, where these recommendations are not coming from, just a bunch of us, but it is really being crowdsourced from people who are directly impacted by this. So we hope to take this forward and wish us all luck, I guess. Thank you so much.